And action. Welcome, everybody. Welcome.
Wait, hold on 1 second. Sorry.
Give me a count now. We're like on TV here. 5, 4, 3. I have to get my tie on. Look at that.
Should be all set, Senator.
All right. And action. Okay. Is there some feedback here? All right. Welcome, everybody, to the New Hampshire Senate Energy hearing. This is going to be an omnibus bill today. But before we get started, I'm going to have to read this long script. So I'm going to welcome everybody to New Hampshire State Senate. I'm Kevin Avard. Hello, good morning. It's been a long night. I'm Kevin Avard from Senate District 12, and today we'll be holding a meeting with the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee. And before I get started, I'll read through the checklist to ensure that the meeting that we are holding is in compliance with the right to know law. As chair of the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee, I find due to the state of emergency declared by the governor as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and in accordance with the governor's energy order number 12 pursuant to Executive Order 2020-04 and its extensions, this public body is authorized to meet electronically. Please note that there is no physical location to observe and to listen contemporaneously to this meeting, which was authorized pursuant to the governor's emergency order. In accordance with the energy order, I'm confirming that 1, we're providing public access to the meeting by telephone, with additional access possible by video and other electronic means. We are utilizing Zoom for electronic meetings. All members of the committee and selected legislative staff have the ability to communicate contemporaneously in this meeting through this platform, and public has access to the contemporaneously to watch and to listen to the meeting on Zoom or YouTube and via phone by following the directions and the links provided on the General Court website. Number 2, we have provided public notice of the necessary information for accessing the meeting in the Senate calendar. We also provide a mechanism for the public to alert the public body during the meeting. If there are any problems with the access, if anyone has any problems, please email remotesenate@ledge.state.nh.us. That's remotesenate@ledge.state.nh.us, or call 603-271-6931. In the event that the public is unable to access the meeting, it will be adjourned and rescheduled. Please note that all votes taken during this meeting shall be done by roll call. And finally, let's start the meeting by taking a roll call attendance, which each member will state their presence and if anyone is in the room with them during this meeting, which is required by the right to know law. I will call the roll. Senator Gaida.
Senator Guide is at his home in Warren, New Hampshire with my daughter and grandson. May occasionally transit the room. I'm currently in the room alone.
Senator Gray.
This is Senator Gray. I'm at home in my home in Rochester, and I'm alone in this room.
Senator Waters.
I'm alone in this room in my home in Dover, New Hampshire.
Senator Perkins Quokka.
Yes, Senator Perkins Quokka. I'm at my home in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. My family is downstairs.
And I'm Senator Kevin Avard. I'm here in Nashville, New Hampshire. We have one person in the house and a couple of pets that are very vocal from time to time. And with that, we'll start the meeting. And Griffin, we're going to hear what? Today's going to be a long day, folks. We have what is called an omnibus bill. So we're going to have a number of bills, and we're just going to go by, I believe, by section or in order. And we'll take questions with that in regards to the order. I'm just going to do one quick thing. And I guess I'll be introducing Senate Bill 91. And just going to be reading the analysis, which is this bill Adopt-
Senator Avard, I'm the prime sponsor, so I think I'm supposed to.
Oh, you are. I beg your pardon.
No, sorry to interrupt.
No, that's right. You are the prime. I apologize. Senator
So
White,
if you would like me to, would you like me to do this, Senator?
yes, please.
Okay. Well, good morning, the Senator David Waters, District 4. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, and I'm glad to be offering Senate Bill 91, which, as our chairman said, is an omnibus bill. I'm reminded of a former colleague of ours, Senator Sanborn, if I may paraphrase, you're either omnibus or you're non-nibus. And I think that I appreciate the guidance of Chairman Avard and working with leadership in both parties to put together this omnibus bill of similar pieces of legislation. That said, I think that what we will need to do, and I as prime sponsor will work with members who have sponsored the LSRs underlying the parts of this bill with the committee to see after the hearing today what kind of amendments are needed in each part. And also recognizing that really, it seems to me, Mr. Chairman, that our goal here is to, because it is an omnibus bill and has many important pieces, that we will really need to see what we can do so that the whole piece of legislation, whether some parts survive or not, the committee process or whatever amendments are done, that we can come forward with a bill that can have very strong support in our body and in the other body as well. So I know this is somewhat new to us doing it this way, although we had some experience last spring. But I hope that we will be able to successfully do this, and that I will be happy as prime sponsor to work with all the people who have the prime sponsors or co-sponsors of parts of it. So that said, let me briefly mention the parts. Part 1, based on LSR 210945, is relative to the installation, interconnection, and use of energy storage systems by customers of utilities. Part 2 is based on LSR 210881, relative to hydroelectric generators that share equipment for the purposes of interconnection to the electric grid. Prime sponsor here was Senator Bradley. Part 3, LSR 210975, relative to the aggregation of electric utility customers. Prime sponsor Senator French. Part 4, LSR 210988, relative to group host credits for net energy meetings, sponsored by Senator Perkins Quokka. Part 5, LSR 210991, relative to the purchase of output of limited electrical producers in intrastate commerce and including qualifying storage system, sponsored by Senator Bradley. Part 6, LSR 211007, relative to the aggregation of electric customers, sponsored by Senator Avard as prime sponsor. And Part 7, relative to net energy metering limits for customer generators, sponsored by Senator Prentice. And Mr. Chairman, as the prime sponsor of Part 1, I will continue to discuss this. Folks will be very familiar with the work we've done over the last several years on energy storage, really trying to provide guidance here as we move into a new era of energy storage. I think it's recognized that storage is going to be increasingly important, certainly on the utility scale for reliability projects such as Eversource is working on now in New Hampshire, and a much larger project down on Cape Cod. But it really is recognized that for reliability at the utility scale, energy storage is going to be important. But also there's a great future for energy storage for the individual consumers. And that's much of what this bill and work that we've done in the last few years has tried to parse out in terms of behind the meter, in front of the meter, and the rate setting, and the transmission charges, and so on and so forth. I would like to add that energy storage is likely to gain enormous significance as we move forward on offshore wind, because it has a great potential there to help reduce peak demands and even out the load through the use of energy storage at times when renewable energy sources, whether it's the giant there will be offshore wind, but also other sources such as hydro and solar, that this will be a great way of reducing the cost to New Hampshire consumers. So it's important for us to get this work done. Last year, we had a bill that Senator Floyd Clark and I had worked on really for a couple of years, and we had really gained a lot of broad and bipartisan support for the approaches that was taken, and then COVID interrupted that process. And so we ended up passing a House bill that asked the PUC to study for, open a docket and gave them a couple of years to work on this. That work has begun and is underway, but it was felt pretty strongly that we should revive the bill from last year that gave further direction to the PUC. And this is for two reasons. One, because of all the good work that was done, that came to some consensus on how we actually do this, that could provide very good guidance to the Public Utilities Commission and really mesh well with what they're doing now. But secondly, that this could move the process on much more quickly. We've been waiting for several years to get this done, and that 2-year time frame, PUC works hard, they do great work, but it's really felt that given the economic advantages here and the investment opportunities for folks to make, that this bill would be a path forward on that. And so let me note about the bill itself, that it does not repeal the existing statute that we passed last year for PUC to open that docket. That will continue, and that is made explicit in the legislation. But it does introduce a few new things. First, you'll see in the definition sections, there are some clarifications about definitions. If you compare this to existing statute in 374H, you'll see that it gives some surer guidance about bring your own devices, energy storage, definitions. It adds the ISO New England as a factor here in determining things, local network services, regional networks, renewable energy sources. And let me note as well that one issue that has come up, if you look to page 2, lines 29 and 30, what would be the capacity for these energy storage folks to be able to put this into the wholesale, intrastate wholesale electricity market, and what potential benefit that would have in reducing the load that is attributed to New Hampshire, and thus, reducing our transmission costs through ISO New England. And I will have an amendment to discuss about that when we move along. And then really the heart of the bill is in this new section H2, and it basically bumps the existing H2, which is the bill from last year to form that, to ask PUC to open that docket. And so it clarifies many things. It has a public interest statement that, hey, it's really good to limit these barriers to the installation or connection and use of customers cited behind the meter storage systems in New Hampshire. We're really big on individuals having rights on their own properties, and to do this to their economic interest. And so this is, really empowers individuals in their own economic choices. And it clarifies that they have a right to install this subject to the appropriate regulation, and that then the PUC and the utilities should find appropriate ways to charge for the interconnection, to make those interconnections, to do the appropriate metering, and then what is going to be the fair share for compensation, and how are the charge going to be on the transmission costs, that they'll be able to use these for peak reduction programs. And I think we all know, given what happened a few years ago when the gas prices spiked so high and the cost of electricity just went, through the roof, that this device peak reduction program would really save consumers a lot if they're able to shave that peak and not have to buy such expensive energy when there's peak demand. It clarifies again that utilities shall not own behind the meter storage in people's homes, with the exception of the Liberty Utilities pilot program, which is successfully underway up in the Lebanon area. And just to note too that nothing in this section should alter the principles of net energy metering under RSA 362A9 or any existing electrical permit requirements or any existing licensing or certification requirements for installs and so forth. So it's not meant to change those things. And then what you see on pages 3 and 4 is basically a repetition of what was in statute. And then there's some more new material in bold down at the bottom of page 4, reasserting, as we do elsewhere, and this is, a principle the governor has often repeated, to benefit low-income customers, and then clarifying in the bold there that this limitation there to the 6% doesn't apply to front of the meter storage, the energy storage pilot of Liberty Utilities. So, Mr. Chairman, I wanted to go through this. I think we're going to hear a good deal from some people testifying on it. I think that it's pretty good to go. I know that Eversource is going to want to have some conversation about this and other sections of it. Maybe not testifying today, but we'll provide information about tweaks they think or some changes. So, as I said at the beginning, I'm happy, as all the other prime sponsors of the underlying pieces are, to work with folks after the hearing today to get together a bill that can move forward. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. And I'm just going to ask any committee members, are there any questions? I have one, Senator Waters. Did you want to introduce any amendments to this before we got any further?
Well, as I said, I think the process really needs to be that I'll mention what I have, okay?
Sure.
But I just think that we're going to hear a lot in the process. It's going to be, we're going to have to kind of work through these things. So if I go back up to the definition sections on page 2, lines 29 and 30, potentially what I would do is that reads now wholesale electricity markets mean any energy capacity or ancillary service market that ISO New England operates. And I would add to that operates, comma, or any intra-state wholesale electricity market pursuant to RSA 362A-2A. I think we're going to hear a little bit more about this from Clifton Below when he testifies, but essentially what that means is that you could potentially sell into that intrastate wholesale electricity market, which means, as I understand it, that this would be a way of reducing the overall load and thus the transmission costs for Eversource. So we'll hear more about that, but that's a potential amendment that I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Senator. And before we receive any testimony, we do have a referee. Our lovely assistant, Deborah, is going to be taking the clock very seriously. So if you want to testify, just remember there's a 3-minute limit, and it'll be at her discretion, not mine. So with that, we will introduce I'll let you introduce our first speaker, please.
Senator, do you want each senator to introduce their part first? Do you want to go through each part and have them introduce it and then go back and take testimony?
Actually, what I thought we were going to do is do the first part, hear testimony, do the next part, hear testimony. Is that the way we set it up last night, Griffin?
I think it might be better just to give each prime sponsor the opportunity to introduce their part first and then go back through each part and allow testimony, if that makes sense. So
that's what we're going to do. Then,
okay, so we've had Senator Waters introduce part 1, part 2, and part 5 are being prime sponsored by Senator Bradley. So you might want to bring him up next. Yeah.
Senator Bradley, are you there?
Right. I don't see him right now.
Hold on, I got him.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Senator.
Here we go. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Bless you, Griffin. You just saved me a couple hours. Part 2 and part 5. Part 2 is a very narrow provision that was included in one of the bills that got tabled last year. It deals with Monadnock Paper. They have 3 separately licensed hydroelectric dams of 425 kilowatt, 750 kilowatt, and 770 kilowatts. So they are above the total of 1 megawatt to be able to net meter, but they are, as I indicated, separately licensed by the Federal Energy Regulatory Committee. And because of the way the net metering rules work in New Hampshire, they can only net meter up to 1 megawatt. This corrects that situation for these historic dams that have been in operation for a long time. Monadnock Mills is a paper mill. It's in Bennington, New Hampshire. And I believe that there should be little controversy about this. And I would commend it to the committee for your approval. With regard to section 5, I am going to yield all of my time to former Senator Clifton Belo to introduce that when the time is appropriate for the public to testify. So with that, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much, and I hope I've been in your time limit.
You did.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Did you want to take any questions from any senators if they have any?
If there are any questions, happily so.
And seeing none.
Thank you.
Thank you. And next,
Senator, it would be Senator French. But I don't see him.
Deb, he's just labeled.
Yeah. I will allow him to talk. Senator, good morning.
Good morning.
good morning. Welcome,
Hi.
Senator French.
Hey, glad to be on the bus with everybody.
Your floor is all yours.
Thank you. I'm bringing before you part 3 of this great omnibus piece of legislation. I don't have quite as much to say as the esteemed Senator Waters, but I will give it a shot. In 2019, the legislature passed and the governor signed into law a new community-based purchasing platform for electricity known as Community Choice Aggregation. You probably all remember this. This program allows communities to aggregate their electric users into large-scale buying pools for the purpose of offering an alternative to the standard offer rate by utilities. Community choice aggregations, or CCAs, allow smaller ratepayers access to better pricing, more renewable options, better contract terms, and heightened consumer protections. While there seems to be a genuine excitement throughout the state, and I've seen it all over, to take advantage of this new law, the proposed legislation before you seeks to correct some technical flaws related to utility billing and bring us more in line with the practices utilized in other states where CCAs has become widespread. Under current utility tariffs, if a customer makes only a partial payment on the bill, the CCA would only be paid after the utility receivables are paid, putting CCAs at a competitive disadvantage to utility provided default energy service. Part 3 of this bill would simply provide pro rata application of partial payments to both utility and CCA receivables. I understand that Eversource and perhaps other utilities might prefer to purchase or prefer a purchase of receivables or a POR approach. So a possible amendment that might be coming forward on this section would be to give utilities with PUC review and approval the choice of prorating partial payments or purchasing the receivables of CCAs and perhaps other electricity suppliers at a discount to account for uncollectible receivables and the costs of collection. With that all said, I would invite the people that are in line behind me at some point in their homes or in their offices to answer any questions the committee has. So I thank you very much for your time this morning.
Thank you, Senator. Are you able to take any questions from any
Yeah,
senators?
I'd be happy to answer what I can.
Okay, are there any questions? Seeing none, thank you, Senator French.
Thank you very much.
Yes,
Have a
sir.
great day.
Alrighty. I believe next is 51. Senator.
I believe, yes, part 4, Senator Perkins Quokka.
Oh,
Yes, sir. Okay, thank you. Good morning. For the record, I am Senator Perkins Quokka, representing Senate District 21, the city of Portsmouth, and the towns of Madbury, Lee, Durham, Newington, Newmarket, Newfields. I'm the prime sponsor of SB 91 Part 4, Group Host Credits for Net Energy Metering. I want to make a brief disclosure statement before I introduce my bill concerning Part 7 of SB 91. I filed a declaration of intent this morning and want to bring to the committee's attention that my employer has a financial interest in this issue, as it is a solar company, but no greater interest than would accrue to any other member of the business, profession, occupation, or other group. I will be participating today on that portion of the bill under the advice of Senate Counsel. The purpose of this bill is a clarification of the original language of the bill. RSA 362 A9, Section C originally was intended to provide group hosts with a payment bill for their excess generation. Such excess generation compensation rate is determined using the tariff applicable to such group host, but in addition, there is an adder of a determined amount as specified in this section, 3 cents for a limited 2-year period, dropping to 2.5 cents per kilowatt after that. The new language intends to fix the amount of the adder at the time that the project is qualified by the PUC for group host net metering. Such fix is important to give certainty to those building and financing solar projects. Construction financing from a bank will require a pro forma set of financials to verify debt service ratio and other relevant criteria to financing. And so it is important for the project to have a fixed income stream. I received a call from General Counsel of the PUC last night requesting a minor language change to the bill. So I expect that I'll work with Madeline Minot from Clean Energy New Hampshire to bring an amendment back to the committee on that point. I'm available to answer any questions, though I expect Madeline may be better able to answer your questions today.
thank you, Senator. Are there any questions from our senators? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Senator Avard, Senator Bradley indicated when he was introducing part 2 that perhaps Mr. Belo should introduce part 5. Is that what you would prefer
Right now?
to introduce it, or we can do that after?
Let's do it after, just so we get through this process, and then we'll introduce it after.
Very good. Then you are up next, introducing part 6.
Okay, so SB 109, so I'm Senator Kevin Avard. This bill establishes an exemption under the net metering for group net metering facilities that generate electricity to offset electrical requirements of a group consisting of political subdivisions. And I won't get into much detail on it, but the changes or the significant parts are in line 7 and of course line 13. And we'll have plenty of people to testify onto that, and we'll move on unless you have any questions. Seeing none. That was easy.
Very good.
Okay.
Part 7 would be introduced by Senator Prentice. I will allow her to talk.
Senator Prentice, are you there?
I am here. Thank you very much, Senator Avard and members of the committee, for the opportunity to introduce Part 7 of Senate Bill 91. For the record, my name is Suzanne Prentice and I represent District 5. Senate Bill 91, Section 7 seeks to lift the net metering cap from 1 to 5 megawatts, allowing consumers, businesses, and communities to take charge of their own energy futures. It is comprehensive net metering legislation that will expand the generator cap and open the door for both new and existing small renewable energy projects, keep energy dollars in our state, and provide good paying jobs, saving ratepayers and taxpayers money while addressing the past concerns raised that this provides a subsidy. So Section 7 is similar to, but not identical to House Bills 365 from 2019 that was passed by both chambers with large bipartisan margins, but was vetoed by the governor and fell short of an overriding of the veto in the House. This version does address the governor's concerns in his veto message that this bill would result in a subsidy of hundreds of millions of dollars. Specifically in Section 3 and Section 4 of the bill, we've addressed these concerns we've addressed these concerns about the subsidy. That's my general introduction, and I would also like to defer for further comment during the hearing to former State Senator Clifton Bilo, my colleague on the Lebanon City Council, as he has helped me address these concerns. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator. Any questions? Seeing none. Thank you very much.
Okay, Senator Avard, I believe the easiest way to do this probably is to go section by section and ask each individual who would like to testify on that part to raise their hands. That way I know, because the sign-in sheets don't indicate such. So if you are interested in testifying on part 1 of Senate Bill 91, please raise your hands. Okay, well, you will start, Senator, with Clifton Bilo.
Welcome, Clifton.
Good morning, Senators. Good to see you. I'm in full support. I am testifying here on behalf of the City of Lebanon. I'm the Assistant Mayor of the city, and I'm in full support of this section part of the bill. I did work closely with Liberty Utilities in developing a time of use rate structure for their battery pilot. So I appreciate the fact that that pilot is allowed to go forward. I do want to just speak briefly to Senator Waters' suggestion regarding a minor amendment adding to the definition of wholesale electricity markets, which is an existing definition, but I think there's a slight amendment that would help that by including in the reference the intrastate, possible intrastate wholesale energy market. And the reason that's important is because it's asking the PUC to later in the bill or existing law to look at how to compensate energy storage projects that participate in wholesale electricity markets for avoided transmission cost to provide net savings to consumers. And there's currently clarification going on at ISO New England. I sent out a PowerPoint that explains that from some of the transmission providers that are going to clarify the transmission tariffs to make clear that if a generator participates, which include battery storage, if they participate in the ISO New England interstate wholesale energy markets, then they would not produce value in terms of reducing transmission costs that are allocated to the state. However, it also clarifies that up to 5 megawatt generation assets, including battery storage, that do not participate in the interstate wholesale market, but rather participate in within state wholesale sales, which a part of our existing statute does enable to a limited extent, and Section 5 of the bill would expand that more clearly, then they can function as a load reducer and help reduce transmission charges. So by simply adding the recognition that there's both an within state wholesale market and a interstate wholesale market, the PUC can evaluate if there are potentially more savings to be had for the state by having these function within state wholesale market where they might provide supply to competitive electric suppliers or community power aggregations. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Next.
Can I ask a question? Mr. Bilo?
You may.
Cliff, thank you for your testimony and your help. I just wanted to clarify because it's a little difficult to understand the language there. Are you saying in the proposed amendment to inter or intra?
The proposed amendment would add a reference to a intra TRA within
Thank you.
state wholesale, which the reference statute does enable to a limited extent.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to get that on the record correctly, because it was, I think might be a little hard for people to distinguish that.
Yes, thank
Thank
you.
you.
Are there any other questions? If not, we will go to Madeline Minot.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I may ask a clarification on how this is going to proceed first, I would like to testify on multiple parts. So should I just talk about part 1 now and then raise my hand again on the other parts? Okay, I see Griffin nodding. Thank you. For part 1, energy storage is very promising and needed to reduce peak demand and grid resilience. It's a market that's moving and developing very quickly. And so though we are participating in the investigation going on at the Public Utilities Commission right now, we think this legislation is complementary and needed. It clarifies the needs for interconnection for energy storage. It enables, but not requires the PUC to approve mechanisms for compensation for energy storage and bring your own device programs. And it also clarifies that utility-owned energy storage would not count towards their allocation of generation under 374G Part 4.2. We think that these are all things that will help the investigation going on at the PUC right now and clarify some things that will help give a clear market signals to those that are interested in developing and installing energy storage so that they may have the confidence to proceed without waiting for the 2 years for the investigation going on at the PUC right now to conclude. So we support this part. Thank you.
Are there any questions? If not, we will go to the next speaker, which is Daniel Weeks. Go ahead, Mr. Weeks.
Good morning. Thank you so much for the opportunity to testify briefly. I'm stepping out of a business meeting and hoping to keep following this as it progresses and maybe touch briefly once more in a later section of the bill as well. But thank you again. My name is Dan Weeks, based in Nashua, New Hampshire. I'm a co-owner at Revision Energy, a clean energy company here in New Hampshire with about 275 employee owners across New Hampshire, Maine, and Massachusetts. And part of my role is to lead our commercial project development team. And wanted to note just a brief perspective from our recent experience. We are increasingly hearing from businesses, mostly small businesses, nonprofits, municipalities, and other clients, as well as our residential business, looking to deploy battery storage. But regrettably, the guidance that we almost always have to give to them is that New Hampshire is unfortunately several years behind best practices in other parts of the region and of the nation. And so the economics just don't make sense yet to deploy battery storage, but we hope that New Hampshire will get there. The reason I'm pleased to speak in support of Section 1 of this omnibus bill is because I do think this takes us a meaningful step forward toward getting there. And just at a high level, we see battery storage as kind of like the Swiss Army knife of the grid. It can provide multiple really valuable services to deal with some of the legitimate concerns around some renewables. Solar, which I focus on, obviously has intermittency based on when the sun is shining, and battery can extend the usefulness of solar, as well as other resources like wind. And the benefits are both individual and system-wide. Certainly at the individual level, we do see some systems, battery systems installed here for pure resiliency, for backup when the grid is down. But we're seeing nowhere near the volume of batteries installed in New Hampshire as we are in the neighboring states, where batteries are also able to provide other grid services. Former Senator Bilo mentioned the pilot in Lebanon, where we're shifting to time of use pricing with Liberty Utilities. That kind of practice, which is widely deployed in other states, makes the benefits of renewables paired with battery storage far greater, not just for the individual homeowner or business, but for the entire system, reducing peak demand enabling virtual power plants that can avoid very costly multi-million-dollar substation upgrades by literally pooling the resources from dozens or hundreds of distributed batteries. So there are a lot of benefits, which I don't need to elaborate here, but needless to say, we see this part of the omnibus bill as allowing New Hampshire and the PUC to take some really needed steps so that we can begin to catch up and grow this segment of the business. We do hope that there will be a lot of other companies coming in as the state legislature signals its interest in local homegrown energy, and that there will be more competition and more opportunity to deploy this very useful technology. And we also think that it really matches New Hampshire's live free mentality, allowing consumers to dictate their energy choices, to be more resilient, but also benefit the entire grid. So again, appreciate your consideration and hope that you will move forward with this section of the bill.
Are there any questions? If not, thank you, Mr. Weeks. And we will go to Huck Montgomery.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for having me. It's Huck Montgomery from Liberty. I want to flag for everybody, I think for the first time for all of you, that Liberty Utilities is actually transitioned to a new brand. We're going to be known simply as Liberty moving forward. So you'll see our new logo on lots of our materials, and that's how we'll be talking about the company. As you all know, we're an electric and gas utility here in New Hampshire, serving the Salem area and the Upper Valley with electricity. And we have a groundbreaking energy storage pilot program that we have undertaken in New Hampshire as well. It's the first of its kind in the country. So Liberty is very excited about the prospects of battery storage here in New Hampshire. And it's great to be here on this Groundhog Day with all of you talking about battery storage again. We have been working on this bill for years, along with folks like Madeline, the other utilities, other interested parties who really want to make sure battery storage is deployed effectively in New Hampshire, and want to urge the committee to move forward with this provision. Even though the docket at the PUC is ongoing, we do expect that the issues that this bill would resolve are essentially consensus issues that have again been developed over the course of several years. That these provisions would address those issues that are again sort of the consensus of the companies that are and stakeholders who are working on this issue in New Hampshire. We do think that it's important to balance utility and non-utility involvement in the deployment of battery storage, and essentially that is what this bill would work to do. We're certainly open to some of the conversations that are happening currently around adaptations or amendments to this. I know Senator Waters has talked a little bit about that. And, I don't think any of the stakeholders who would like to seek passage of this legislation are rigid in seeking this language only. But we do think that a lot of work has gone into it. There is a lot here that is the result of compromise and good faith negotiations between utility and non-utility stakeholders. So we got here through years-long collaboration that has included working with all of you. And so we do urge that you consider this this portion of the bill ought to pass, and that we can continue to work together to improve it if that's something that we're able to do, and we think we can. So thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with you today. Looking forward to working with all of you again this year. Thanks so much.
Are there any questions?
If I may.
Of course, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Huck, thanks for your testimony. And I just wanted to reference the bottom of page 4, that new bold language, lines 33 to 35, that reads, it's about the 6% of the utility's total distribution peak load. This limitation shall not apply to front of meter energy storage. The energy storage pilot approved by Commission Order number 26209 or demand response. And it seemed my memory of this is that that 6% you were unlikely to hit anyways. But could you comment on this section?
I can, sure. This is really one of the most important provisions in this legislation from our vantage point, because Liberty and I know our sister utilities in New Hampshire are eager to invest in battery storage and think we can do so very effectively in terms of customer benefits. And at present, we're limited by RSA 374G to a total cumulative maximum of 6% of our total distribution peak load and of investment in any distributed energy resource. Okay, so that's really obviously subsequent to kind of due to restructuring, there needed to be this carve out 374G to allow utilities to invest in distributed energy resources in a limited fashion, and which is prudent, again, according to the principles of restructuring. But there's some confusion about the definition of distributed energy storage in 374G. It seems to read, plainly that distributed energy resources include several different things, including electric generation, storage, demand response, and energy efficiency. But the way that the definition statute reads currently can be interpreted and has been interpreted by, for instance, Public Utility Commission staff as meaning that battery storage or energy storage is a category of electric generation, as opposed to electric generation and battery storage, both being categories of distributed energy resources. So really, this is intended to be another way of making sure that that definition is clear and that battery storage is not considered to be electric generation for the purposes of this statute, because electric generation is what is limited to 6%. So that's really the purpose of it. This is one way to do that. Another way to do it would be to simply address the definition itself. I think if you chose to add that in, we would also like to keep this language too, just to make abundantly clear, because that confusion of just very simply the interpretation of that definition has brought us to this point of Liberty and other utilities expectation that we would be prevented from investing in large-scale battery storage due to it being mistakenly folded into and considered to be under the limitations that was intended to be applied to electric generation.
And may I follow up, Mr. Chairman? So thank you, Huck. And I asked that question because, we've discussed this quite a bit, that, the restructuring was just so very important to the consumers in New Hampshire. And it's been very important for us to emphasize, hasn't it, that we don't want to undo restructuring, but with this new technology, there are really investments that can be made, which will save customers substantial funds, depending on the way in which this energy storage capacity can be used. Is that fair to say? That it really is about saving the consumers here?
Absolutely. We expect that certainly having the ability to invest in battery storage would be one way to avoid more costly investments in other infrastructure, distribution, and potentially even transmission infrastructure. And ultimately, the totality of the sections of this legislation are designed to balance, again, the needs of utilities and non-utility interest in this space, such that the deployment of battery storage can really be enabled by both parties, without sort of stepping on one another's toes. So we think that quite consistent with the principles of restructuring, this is limited, and certainly any utility proposals on battery storage would have to result in just and reasonable rates when they're put before the Public Utility Commission. And it's certainly not an unlimited sort of blank check for utilities to go out and waste customers' money on bells and whistles that aren't providing value. It's really intended to enable utilities to make prudent investments in projects that will help save customers money in the long run, improve resiliency, improve the reliability and renewability, sustainability of our electric grid.
Well, thank you, Huck, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, and our last speaker right now is James Monahan. Go ahead, Mr. Monahan.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. I don't want to take a lot of time in section 1 because I think Senator Waters and others have mentioned that this is a byproduct of a great deal of work that went into finding a bill that we could advance on energy storage last year. And we thought we were going to make it across the finish line in June with this, but we didn't quite do that. I work closely with Hunk Montgomery and Madeline Manu, representing Revision Energy and others in the competitive market, and trying to get this compromise done. And I think that with regard to the changes from former Commissioner Belo, I think they only complement the work that's taken place so far. And then I would just echo what Senator Waters and Hunk Montgomery said about the last section, where we're trying to find the right compromise for the role of storage for the distributed electric utility companies. And I think it finds that balance where it allows them to make those investments in storage to do their job as a distribution company, but it's mindful of the fact that we don't want the utilities out building big batteries simply for the purpose of discharging them into the wholesale market. And so I think that was the goal all around, and this language accomplishes a lot for a lot of folks. So I'm happy to support part one of the bill, and can answer any questions folks might have.
If I may, Mr. Chairman. Jim, thank you, and thanks for your work on this last year and this year. I did want to raise the question about the new language on page 4, lines 26 to 28, the benefit low-income customers. And I don't know whether someone from the PUC is going to be here to testify on this, or maybe whether my colleague on the committee, Senator Perkins Quokka, who messaged me about some potential questions about this, but I wasn't aware of the questions yet, so I just wanted to give a moment for that. And if Senator Perkins Quokka or the POC isn't here to discuss it, we can let it go to another time. But I just wanted to bring that up.
Chair, I'm happy to comment if. Okay. Yeah, thank you, Senator. And I'd be happy to have anyone here respond to it. I basically just received a call from General Counsel to PUC last night, and their concern about page 4, lines 26 through 28 was that from their perspective, it would be difficult to interpret and enforce the language as drafted in lines 26 through 28. They're not sure how they would ensure that energy is being used to the benefit of low-income customers. So I don't know if some additional clarification might be helpful, but I do think it might be beneficial to have that conversation further with them. I said I would pass along the concern.
Thank you.
Okay, is there anyone else who wishes to speak on part 1 of Senate Bill 91? There are a few more. All right. We have Karen Crampton. Let me allow you to speak. Go ahead. Go ahead, Karen.
Wonderful. Thank you. Good morning. This is Karen Crampton. I'm the director of the Sustainable Energy Division from the Public Utilities Commission. And I just wanted to thank Senator Quokka for passing along the General Counsel and my concerns about those lines 26 through 28 in part 1. First of all, I should state that the commission does not take a position on this bill, but in reviewing it, we, as the senator mentioned, were somewhat unclear as to how we could guarantee that those savings and or benefits would be passed on to low-income customers. So I think Senator Waters, if you'd like to give us a call, we are happy to work through amendments with you. Trying to understand better as to what the intent of that section and that language was. So thank you.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, thank you, Karen, and let's be in touch. But let me just to get this out in a public session. It seems to me that this is a principle that has general support in a lot of ways, in a lot of areas of what we do. But I guess what I'm saying is that would it work best to find some language that gave the PUC as feasible or in the best determination of the PUC to give you the leeway to determine, during any docket that this is the way that we can do that? Or do you think it's best that we actually put some real guardrails on just what that means?
I think resolving these things through rules and dockets is always a good idea to give us the flexibility.
Okay.
However, what I would prefer to do is have a conversation, if you don't mind, with
Yeah.
the general counsel to make sure that I'm providing you with the correct direction.
Yeah. Well, let's set that up. But I just wanted to get that out in the public record, and we'll work on it. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, last call on part 1. I see no hands raised, so let's go to part 2. If you wish to testify, please raise your hand.
Deb, before we continue, I just want to clarify. I have been getting a couple of emails from people who are confused as to the process for this hearing, so I just want to clarify how we're handling it. This is Senate Bill 91 that we are hearing today. This is the only bill we are hearing today. Within Senate Bill 91, there are 7 different LSRs, 7 different parts to the bill. In order to give people the opportunity to comment on each part, what we are doing is going part by part, allowing people to testify on just those parts. So for example, we just heard all the testimony on Senator Waters' LSR, which was part 1. We are now moving on to part 2, which I believe is primed by Senator Bradley. If people wish to testify, they will raise their hand through Zoom, or if you're on the phone, press *9, leave your hand raised, and you will be called upon. Then after we hear everybody who's raised their hand and testified on part 2, we will then move to part 3, and the process will repeat until we get through all the parts on Senate Bill 91. I just want to clarify that because I've gotten a couple of texts and emails from people who are confused about the process. So as of right now, we are beginning to hear testimony on part 2, which is Senator Bradley's LSR. If anybody wishes to testify on part 2, raise your hand now and leave it up. All right, Deb, take over.
Thank you, Griffin. And we have, again, Madeline Minot. Okay, Madeline?
Thank you again. Again, Clean Energy New Hampshire supports this part, or the LSR that it came from. We've been working on net metering for quite a while, and we get down into the weeds. And this is would clarify a situation that's specific to legacy small hydropower projects. Senator Bradley did a great job of introducing it, so I don't need to re-explain it. It applies to a very limited number of projects, currently only 1. And because these hydropower projects were originally designed to all provide power for one mill, they were all interconnected together, even though they're all individual projects. And so this affects whether or not they qualify for net metering. So we think that this would be very helpful to clarify this one specific situation, and we urge you to support this part of the bill. Thank you.
Okay, I do not see anyone else who wishes to speak on part 2.
Does anybody wish to speak on part 2, which is primed by Senator Bradley? If you wish to raise your hand or press *9 if you're on the phone. With that, I think we can conclude on part 2 and move on to part 3 of the Senate Bill 91.
Please raise your hand if you'd like to testify on part 3. Okay, we have Mr. Below again. Go ahead.
Good morning again. This, as Senator French said, this part of the bill is to address a problem in terms of CCAs or community power aggregations being treated on a comparable basis with default utility provided default energy service. The amendments to RSA 53E that enables municipal and county aggregation of electric customers on an opt-out basis after the plan is approved by the governing body and legislative body of the municipality or county has gotten a lot of communities very interested in this possibility, but one of the barriers is the fact that they would be at the bottom of the hierarchy in terms of payment for receivables. And so what this part of the bill does is try to put them on a same basis as utility provided default service, since the CPA could be the alternative default service provider. I have circulated a suggested amendment that I worked on developing with Bart Frommuth from Freedom Energy Logistics, who's an aggregator broker, and is in his conversations with potential suppliers. They've expressed concern that this issue needs to be addressed, but an alternative way to address it is what's called a purchase of receivables program. And I think Eversource has indicated through their advocacy for House Bill 315, where they've drafted some language to enable a purchasing of receivables as a way to address this. They have that in Massachusetts and Connecticut. So the proposed amendment would really give the utilities the option of either doing a pro rata allocation of receivables. So if somebody makes a partial payment, it would go to everybody that's owed in proportion to what they're owed. There could still be a hierarchy where aged receivables get paid before current receivables. It provides that alternative, or it would also provide the alternative of doing a purchasing of receivables where they purchase the receivables but at a discount to account for the cost of collection and a bad debt. And it also leaves a fair amount of discretion to the commission as to the extent of how this would be done and all the details. So it leaves the details to be worked out probably through an adjudicated proceeding at the commission. So that's what that's all about. And Bart Frommuth was not able to make it here today, but indicated his support for this kind of approach as well. And so that's basically it. Thank you.
Any questions? Okay.
If I may, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, Senator Waters.
Yeah, thank you. So bottom line here is that this levels the playing field in terms of how we deal with this in other places. But that your sense is that if we were to amend the bill as you direct based on the language from the House bill, and I ask you this because I'm not sure the Eversource is going to actually speak today, but it's your belief that if we amended this bill that way, that it would satisfy the recommendations of Eversource?
I believe so. I have just recently, in the past hour, circulated this to all the utilities and the PUC. Because of the short time frame, they haven't had a chance to really look at it. So I'm happy to work. I have a meeting set up with Liberty on Thursday where we're going to look at the details of this issue. I'm happy to work with the utilities, the PUC, and the committee to refine this language. Thank you.
And Mr. Chairman, if I may, for our process, that it seems to me that we might be asking all the folks who are proposing amended language to, send it to the sponsor, the underlying, perhaps send it to me as the prime, but certainly the key thing here is to send it to Griffin so that he will, have everything in hand that when we decide how to put together a committee amendment. Does that make sense, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, it does.
Thank you.
Okay, I believe that Heidi Kroll wished to speak on part 2. Let me bring her in, please. Heidi?
Heidi, you there?
Hold on. Okay, Heidi? You may unmute, Heidi. Okay. Heidi, all set? Heidi, we can't hear you.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes.
I apologize for the technical difficulties and also for the fact that I have 2 Zooms going on at the same time. So good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Heidi Kroll. I work at Gallagher, Callahan, and Gartrell. And I am here today representing Monadnock Paper Mills, testifying on part 2, and I appreciate your accommodating me. So we are in support of part 2, and I did hear Senator Bradley and Ms. Minot testify, and so they've given you some background, but just very quickly, Monadnock Paper Mills has 3 small hydro facilities, all of which are behind the meter. They're small, they're under a megawatt each, 425 kW, 750 kW, and 770 kW. They all feed into the mill. The mill uses all of the power that the hydro facilities generate whenever the mill is operating, and then also buys any additional power it needs from a third-party supplier. The 3 hydro facilities are separately licensed by FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. They're also each individually approved by the New Hampshire Public Utilities Commission to be eligible for Class 4 in the RPS program. And so by all measures, they are separate, independent facilities. But because they all feed into the mill, and then the mill has a single interconnection point with the grid, they are viewed by Eversource as a single 1.9 megawatt hydro facility. And of course, that exceeds the 1 megawatt cap that we currently have in law. And so the purpose of this language is simply to kind of remedy this this situation. Obviously, any other owners of 1 megawatt hydro facilities, 1 and under, have been allowed to net meter for many years. And unfortunately, Monadnock Paper Mills has not been able to take part in that. You know, as others mentioned, this is kind of just a very unique and rare problem, kind of unique to legacy hydro facilities because of the way mills were set up, and the hydro's purpose was to, back in the day, was to power these mills. So we would appreciate your support for part 2. I'm happy to answer any questions. I did submit written testimony. But with that, I will take any questions or let you proceed.
Any questions?
Okay. We have Amanda Noonan.
Good morning. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Oh, great. I love it when technology works the way it's supposed to. Good morning, committee members. I'm Amanda Noonan. I'm the director of the Public Utilities Commission, Consumer Services and External Affairs Division. While certainly the provisions in Part 3 are a policy decision for the legislature to consider, I did just want to raise a couple things that have not come to light so far this morning. And currently, as I think Clifton Below explained, the hierarchy structure for the allocation of payments goes to the oldest receivables first, and the utilities receivables are paid, then the suppliers receivables are paid, and then the current receivables, with the utilities being paid and then the suppliers being paid. This change would prorate that. So rather than the utility coming first and then the supplier, it would prorate it between the 2 of them. And for a customer that makes their payment in full every month, there's not a whole lot of difference in how this all would work. But for customers that are not able to pay their bill in full each month, a change such as this potentially would shift costs of bad debt onto the utility, which would then be spread among all utility customers. Again, this is a policy decision on how this should all work, but I did just want to explain how that all works through the cost of providing utility service.
Okay, any questions?
I have a question. Could you repeat that about how that it is what you just did, what you just said with regards to spreading the cost amongst the other ratepayers.
Certainly. I'm sorry if it wasn't clear.
With regards to the bad debt and all.
Yeah, so as written, this payment hierarchy structure in the legislation has the potential for a bad debt that's written off, a balance that's not collectible, that doesn't get collected and is written off, for more to wind up in the utility bucket than the supplier bucket, than under the current hierarchy structure. So that increases the utility's bad debt expenses, which then get picked up by all other customers. If you move to a purchase of receivables, as Mr. Belo explained, there is some percentage discount to account for bad debt expense. But in essence, that entire balance is now owed by the utility. And to the extent a customer doesn't pay, it's not collectible, it would increase the bad debt expenses that then get paid for by all other utility customers.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Senator Waters?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Perhaps this is not a figure that you could really identify, but would you have a sense of how much bad debt we're talking about?
Oh, gosh, no, I don't. Perhaps the utilities might be able to tell you how much is associated with competitive energy supply arrearages, but I don't have that figure in front of me. I'm sorry.
If I may follow up, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. So as I think through it, if somebody has bad debt, this is different from other kinds of debts because, a collection agency, and at some point somebody, if they don't pay, somebody eats that. What seems to me to make a little difference is that this is a public utility and, we have a lot of protections against people having their utilities shut off and getting cold. If we're talking about the, home, residential customer. And so, does that mean that there is a kind of a logic because under the public utility structure and state statute saying that we want to, provide some protection to those folks, that there is some logic to an understanding then that this debt might get spread out among the all ratepayers? Is that kind of the logic here?
Yes, I think that's a fair way to look at it. There are certainly more protections for customers of a regulated utility in terms of provision of service, not being disconnected. It is, deemed an essential type of service than a private industry, for example, who can just simply stop serving you without a whole lot of requirements. So that is part of the reason for sharing of these costs among all utility ratepayers. Yes.
Thank you. And just some more follow-up. And it's kind of here that somebody ends up holding the bag, and this is a bag that can't really be passed off by the utility in some ways. So that perhaps what they're proposing in terms of the purchasing, that at least recognizes some cost there that gets accounted for, but the bottom line is still the bad debt, right?
Yeah, I think that's correct. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, I don't see anyone else's hand raised for part 3. So we will go on to part 4. If you are interested in testifying, please raise your hand on part 4. Okay, back to Ms. Minot. You may speak.
Thank you so much again, Senators. We were involved in passing the enabling legislation for low moderate income community solar, which comes with that adder that Senator Perkins Coca did a great job of explaining. Over last year, we participated in the rulemaking at the Public Utilities Commission, which updated the PUC 900 rules on net metering to incorporate this program. We and several solar developers that participated in that rulemaking process and provided input mentioned that grandfathering of the adder is something that they view as necessary to be able to finance such projects. We were told that the enabling legislation did not include grandfathering language, and so PUC staff felt that that was not something we could tackle or address in the rulemaking. So that's why we asked to have this addressed through this legislation. Not having a specified term for the adder creates significant challenges to finance these projects because it adds uncertainty. All the developers felt that the language was not, did not give them enough confidence to be able to get financing and to be able to know that there would be an adder for the duration of the project. So the intent here is to fix and grandfather the adder for a defined term. So for example, if a project that serves low moderate income communities were to go into service this fall, the adder is 2.5 cents. We would like to make it clear that that adder will be in effect for the duration that that project is under the current net metering tariff, which currently the net metering tariff is grandfathered to 2040. So I hope that that all makes sense. No projects have been developed yet under this program, and we think that this is a small correction that would help developers, that would help create more interest from developers in serving these populations. So thank you, and I'm happy to take any questions.
No questions? Okay, thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak on part 4? I have no one else. Okay, then we will move right along to part 5. Please raise your hand if you wish to testify on part 5. Mr. Belo, let me go ahead.
Okay, there we go. Good morning again, Assistant City of Lebanon Mayor Clifton Belo. And this section of the bill is sort of a rewrite of a section that has a very long history, but has never really been used. This is a part of the statute that enables limited producers, which is generators under 5 megawatts, that don't have to be registered with ISO New England as a participant in their markets to be able to, currently the law says they can sell to any 3 purchasers that could be really any type of entity. So that could either be at retail or in intrastate wholesale sales, such as to a competitive supplier. And what this section of the bill does is really update that statute to enable a competitive market for both distributed generation as well as storage facilities of up to 5 megawatts that aren't participating in the ISO New England market. And it's really a market-based alternative with no subsidies to expanding net metering to 5 megawatts. This gives 1 to 5 megawatt generators potential outlets within the state where they might be able to maximize their value. It also recognizes the fact that if they're functioning as load reducers on the distribution grid, then they actually, and then they produce power at the time of monthly coincident peak when transmission charges are allocated to the state based on the total demand at the hour of coincident peak. If they can help reduce that, then they would get credit for most of that, although there's some value that would pass on to all the other ratepayers under the language of the bill. This is similar to, I had the number up, a bill 1262, House Bill 1262, that was sponsored by Representative Costable in the last session. That was, I think, the only bill that dealt with distributed generation that was supported by both the governor and Clean Energy New Hampshire. Some of the senators, Senator Guida, you might remember this, part of this was in Senate Bill 13 from a couple of years ago. And it reflects some of the work that went on both in the Senate over the past couple of years, as well as in the House last year on 1262, and sought to address some concerns that were raised by the commission and other parties. It really puts the burden of administering this on either competitive suppliers or community power aggregations. So it doesn't, you know, it's crafted to try to avoid putting any burden on the utilities to do this. And again, it's under the oversight of the commission in setting this up. I would just point out I think there was one typo in the bill that is at the top of page 7, line 2. It references such non-participation in FERC jurisdictional intrastate wholesale markets. That word should be interstate. That's that confusing word. And because it's clear, just one thing that's really important, it's clear under federal law and recent Supreme Court decisions that states have exclusive jurisdiction over within state wholesale markets as well as retail sales. And if we don't explicitly enable it, then we're sort of saying we don't want, we're not enabling these within state wholesale sales, which are potentially quite valuable in terms of helping customers save cost and develop distributed generation and storage. So I think it's a really important option to move forward, and happy to work with any interested parties in any refinements that might be needed. I'll stop there. I can also, if the committee's open to it, I can provide some more written explanation and background on this. I just didn't have time to do it before today.
Yes, that'd be great. Senator Waters.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Cliff. What are other states doing about this?
Well, it's curious because some states like New York are very actively working to develop what's called a distribution system operator platform to enable distributed resources to essentially exchange power at the distribution system level below the ISO market level. But generally, although our original restructuring statute called for this kind of development, it's become sort of a bit of sort of sloppy language saying, well, FERC has jurisdiction over wholesale markets as a shorthand. Really, they only have jurisdiction over interstate sales of electricity and interstate commerce. Sales of electricity, whether at retail or wholesale, that are within a state are purely state jurisdictional. So some states like Texas, which has an independent grid, and Hawaii and Alaska fully regulate and enable this kind of intrastate wholesale market. But in a lot of ways, it's sort of been overlooked. And during my 6 years as a commissioner, there was a lot of work that went on in terms of trying to enable these small resources to participate in the regional market, sort of as a workaround for the fact that we hadn't really enabled this at the distribution system level. So there's a lot of talk from the Electric Power Research Institute and a lot of other organizations seeing that this is a really key part of our future. And you know, part of what Lebanon and Lebanon Community Power is interested in developing is what's called transactive energy platform, which is really using price signals, market-based transactions to help manage resources on the grid. So it's really a market-based alternative that is to really animate the retail market and within state development of distributed energy resources and give them proper credit for the value that they produce.
So if I may follow up, Mr. Chairman. So Cliff, just to summarize what you were saying, that because of the language at the bottom of page 6, you know, lines 34 to 37, that this would not have a negative impact, or I guess what I'm saying, would not potentially lay off costs onto other customers because it's not participating in net metering. And that if this is successful by the load reduction, we might actually lower the costs to, you know, other customers because there has been load reduction, and that could reduce our ISO charges. Is that fair?
Yes, that is fair. That's, I think, precisely the point. Okay. And it's really a market-based alternative to the or additional option compared to expanding net metering.
And just to summarize as well, you know,
Okay.
as I'm recalling, the governor supported, was in supporting Senate Bill 13 when we were trying to work on this before. And that, you know, essentially this is something that, you know, we hope would be looked upon favorably by the governor. Is that fair enough to say?
That is, I believe that is. And there's a couple of similar bills over in the House. So hopefully the House will have a chance to work on this as well. But this idea, Senator Bradley agreed to be the prime on this because this goes back to the 90s when we were working together on restructuring. And part of the original vision was to really create these kinds of market-based options.
Yeah.
And the last time we revised this law, it was actually he and I that co-sponsored the bill that created net metering in the first place. And we also tried to update this law, but we didn't really understand what needed to be done to make this part of the law a functional alternative. And so now, you know, 24 years later, we're following through to really create this idea of a retail market where customer choice helps drive investment decisions rather than sort of regulatory decision-making.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. I do not see anyone else who wants to testify on part 5. So we will go on to part 6. If you wish to testify on part 6 of Senate Bill 91, please raise your hand. And that would be Mr. Belo again.
Okay, took me a moment to get unmuted. Thank you. This part of the bill is also to address a problem that arose in looking at the revisions that occurred 2 years ago to RSA 53E, enabling municipal and county aggregation of customers. And the original law that was, or the update to the law that was passed through this committee 2 years ago, did provide that if a community, after approval by their governing body and legislative body, did an opt-out aggregation program, meaning customers would be given notice of the proposed new rate with the community power aggregation, and they could choose to opt out and stay with the utility provided default service, or if they're on competitive supply, they would just stay there, but could opt in. That it provided that once the community did the initial opt-out notice to all the customers within the community, that new customers that signed up with the electric utility would be given information about both the utility provided default service or the community power aggregation alternative default service. And if they could make that choice or choose a competitive supplier, but if they didn't make a choice, they'd be enrolled with the community power default service aggregation. The problem with that is it turns out that the utility software can't accommodate that. So in the process of talking about potential rules, this kind of became apparent that the utilities felt it would be expensive to accommodate this provision in the law. And so we agreed it was an unnecessary expense, and we could simply change the law to say that when somebody new signs up, they go on the utility provided default service. Periodically, maybe once a month, they could provide that list of new customers to the community power aggregation, and then they could do the opt-out or opt-in notice just like they would in the first place, and the customers would have a chance to say no, they want to stay on the utility provided default service or get switched over to the CPA provided service. The proposed amendment that I've circulated draws some of the language that I thought was good language in House Bill 315 that I think Eversource drafted. So it just tries to take the best language from this as introduced, as well as what's in that other bill to make it clear, to make this work well for the utilities and the community power aggregations. And again, happy to work with anyone who's interested in further tweaking this. We are meeting on Thursday with Liberty to go over this language. So hopefully folks will find it amenable to keep in the bill.
Are there any questions? Okay, thank you, Mr. Belo. I don't see anyone else who wishes to testify on Part 6. Then we will go on to Part 7 of Senate Bill 91. If you wish to testify, please raise your hand. Okay, we have Madeline Minot again. Madeline?
Thank you again. We have concerns about Part 7 being included in this omnibus package. There's probably no bigger supporter of net metering expansion than Clean Energy New Hampshire. We've been working on this issue for years. However, trying the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result is the definition of insanity. This is the same net metering language that's been vetoed multiple times by the governor. And I believe that if it remained in this omnibus package, it would get the whole omnibus bill vetoed if it were to pass. There are other parts of this package that, as I mentioned, we are very supportive of and we think are very needed. And so I would encourage you to seriously consider removing Part 7 from this omnibus package so that the other parts may move forward and not be victim to a veto. I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, we have Senator Prentice. Okay, Senator.
Thank you. I just, in response to Ms. Minot's testimony, specifically about that the insanity of going back at a bill again and again, we know that this is basically a good bill and that the changes that have been made address the concerns that were brought forward. And if I could, I'd like to defer to former Senator Clifton Belo, my colleague in Lebanon, to explain what those changes are. I want to be upfront and say that I'm not opposed if this is going to provide a drag on the entire package to stepping back, but we have been purposeful in making the necessary corrections. So would former Senator Belo like to address those?
All right, Senator, I will allow him to speak. Mr. Belo.
Thank you again. Again, on behalf of the City of Lebanon, I would concur with the remarks of Madeline Minot and that this really probably should be pulled out of this bill because it's almost certain to invite a veto even if it could pass the House. It's not clear that it could, but the changes do reflect some of the concepts that were introduced to this committee 2 years ago in Senate Bill 13, but did not move forward at that time, which is to say, it did incorporate language that provided that when net metered resource exports to the grid, that should reduce the wholesale obligation of whoever the supplier is. So for instance, if a supplier in a given hour had 10,000 megawatt hours of delivered to customers, but they had 2,000 megawatt hours coming from exports from net meter generation, then their wholesale load obligation should be the net of that 8,000 megawatt hours. And they will have a total of 8 from the ISO New England market and
Mr. Belo, we lost you. Can you?
It just randomly remuted me for maybe I was over.
Now, there you go. We're all good.
Okay, I was just saying that that if you treat exports to the grid from net metered resources as an offset to the load, which is physically what actually happens, it actually does supply neighbors on the distribution grid. Then most of the so-called subsidy goes away, but there are still two elements that would create some degree of subsidy or cost shifting, which is the cost of RPS compliance, as well as the cost of the utilities to administer default energy service. So this bill, unlike previous bills, does deduct those from the compensation that these larger generators, 1 to 5 megawatts, would get from exporting to the grid. And on the flip side, they currently get no credit for avoided transmission costs. This does provide, if they actually reduced avoided transmission costs, then they could get credit for that. And I think those two sort of balance out. But again, although I think those concepts are good, I think they should come out of this omnibus bill because it could drag down the rest of the bill, which has a lot of important features. So I'll just stop there. I would say that the governor did sign into a law that says for competitive suppliers as well as community power aggregations that the utility should treat their net metered customers that export power to the grid as an offset to their wholesale load obligation otherwise. And that is working well for the city of Lebanon because Liberty Utilities is doing that way. So we have a couple of we have a number of accounts that are on competitive supply, and the competitive suppliers only bill us for the net electricity, and they only have to purchase the net electricity. So arguably, they're finding this to be this form of net metering to be cost neutral to them, and they're happy to provide us with a net metering, when it functions as an offset to our their wholesale load obligation.
Okay, thank you. We'll go on to David Freer.
Can I ask a question? I'm sorry. I have a question for Mr. Buell. Thank you, Cliff. And just a couple of questions. I read through the orders that the PUC released on Friday that has some reference to these matters. And then I guess there's one docket that remains open about it that in some ways might provide some clarity about just where things are with this. And so my question, if you want to comment on those, fine. But my question really is given the kind of complexities and the difficulties on getting a consensus with all parties on this, would this be one that it might make sense to ask to develop some language to ask the PUC to look into the impacts of going to 5 and propose to the legislature ways that it could address the concerns that have been raised about rate shifting? Would that be a potential way to go on this, or should we just kind of wait and try again, when things have developed and just when the markets changes are on all of this matter? So what do you think?
I think that makes some sense. It might make sense if you can pull it out and retain it, because I think not everyone's completely on board in terms of understanding this or thinking this through. I think the commission is starting to think it through. When they looked at alternative net metering tariffs, one of the things that came out of that is looking at the value of distributed generation. And there's two approaches to that. One is if we treat it as a load reducer relative to the interstate grid and supply versus treating it as if it's sold in to the interstate wholesale market and then bought back. And so they're in the process of trying to look at that both ways. This comes down firmly on the side of saying treat it as a load reducer. Net metering is fundamentally a state jurisdictional activity. And so generation really should not be participating in both net metering and interstate markets because that really invites a legal challenge to our whole net metering scheme under federal jurisdiction.
Thank you. If I may, Mr. Chairman. So it does seem what you're saying about the state we're at, that probably best to pull this out, but that maybe a bill could go forward in the next year because it wouldn't be replicative of this. That would direct the PUC in some ways to try to figure out and offer some advice. And by that time, some other, that we'll have a clearer sense about how some of the things are working in other parts of the bill that are addressing net metering in municipalities and so on and so forth. So that might be a way to go.
I would concur with that. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, back to Mr. Krier.
Thank you so much. I'll keep this pretty short. We are opposing the bill, but strictly on Part 7, which is the net metering part. And our contention is that at the current tariff or credit that net metering customers are paid, it is above the utilities avoided costs, and that will create a cost shift, especially that will be enhanced as you increase the cap. So I do want to be clear that we are fine with increasing a cap as long as the tariff is set at a proper rate. We have no problem with 5 megawatt arrays. We have members with, net metering arrays that are over a megawatt already. And that's totally fine, great, we love it. It's just that the current tariff is above the utilities avoided costs. And to a second point, that I think Senator Waters was just raising about getting the PUC involved. The PUC is already, they've conducted one study. They're in a second study that is a result of docket 16-576, the alternate net metering tariff docket, that is looking specifically at the tariff associated with net metering, and they're trying to use these studies to kind of formulate the true value of distributed generation resources. And with that, we hope that they will create a tariff that is both fair to net metering customer generators, but also does not create a cost shift among ratepayers. And so we think it would be prudent to wait until those studies are conducted, or similar studies that Senator Waters was just recommending are finished before we raise the cap and create an increased cost shift. Happy to take any questions. Looks like I got off easy.
Looks like you did. Thank you. And we have Daniel Weeks.
Good morning. Thanks for the opportunity to testify a second time this morning. Dan Weeks again from Revision Energy, Director of Market Development. I certainly concur with the recommendation that's been made to pull out this Part 7 for independent consideration, given there are certainly legitimate questions raised, and respect the committee's judgment on that matter. I did just want to take a minute to update the committee for those who aren't aware on some important empirical research that was completed in the last 2 months regarding this really key underlying question of the net costs and benefits of this kind of distributed generation from solar and other renewable generators, both below and above the 1 megawatt threshold up to 5 megawatts. I believe there's some misunderstanding of what the best data shows on this point. This debate has been a healthy one for several years, and we've certainly heard from the governor and others that they're going above 1 megawatt at the current net metering rate would result in a negative cost shift, burdening ratepayers generally to the benefit of the owners of those distributed generating assets. And I simply want to call the committee's attention to, in case some of you are not yet familiar with the research completed by Synapse Energy Economics, and we'll be glad to send that along for those who haven't seen it. This is an independent energy research firm, and they looked at distributed projects from across New England over the last 5 years, 2014 to 2019, which together generated 8.6 billion kilowatt hours of clean electricity, and calculated based on some very in-depth analysis using methodologies that public utilities commissions in numerous states and other independent analysts have used, calculated net savings to all ratepayers, not the owners of the assets themselves, but to all ratepayers of $1.1 billion over that 5-year period. In New Hampshire specifically, which of course shares a common transmission grid with these other New England states through ISO New England, those net benefits to all ratepayers were estimated at $83 million, even though the bulk of the region's now 186,000 solar arrays are located out of New Hampshire. In unit terms, this study, and again, this is consistent with PUCs in numerous other states in the region and around the country, and other independent analysts have found, in unit terms, they found that the real value of solar to ratepayers and society ranges from 21 cents per kilowatt hour, that's in direct energy value, up to 37 cents per kilowatt hour when public health and environmental benefits are taken into account. And to put that in perspective, that would be between 3 and 5 times more than the current net metering value, what is actually paid for any solar generator that crosses the 100 kilowatt threshold. So we're not even talking today about going above a megawatt up to 5, but even just 100 kilowatts, they're getting between a third and a fifth of the empirically determined value of that solar. And the reason for that, that higher value is, as has been mentioned before this morning, as many committee members know, that solar generation is coincident with peak
Mr.
system-wide
Weeks, we
demand.
lost you.
I believe
Mr.
I
Weeks?
was.
can hear.
Are you hearing me now? Are you able to hear me now? I'm sorry, I was temporarily cut off. I will just conclude and say that, as I think many committee members know, that the reason for that discrepancy, why the value is far greater than what is currently being assigned, is that solar generation peaks coincident with the system-wide peak, summer afternoons when the demand for electricity is highest. And so it reduces the need to transmit electricity from centralized power plants where an estimated 40% of that initial generation is just being lost as heat loss in the generation and transmission process. So I did want to just enter that into the record. I do encourage committee members who aren't familiar with the Synapse study to take a look, and we'll ensure that you have that. And I do appreciate the chance to enter that information regarding the best research currently available on the costs and benefits. And finally, we certainly concur with the BIA and others that this research does need to be done in an official capacity at the PUC. We know that it's been ongoing for some years, and we hope that it will conclude in the near future so New Hampshire can follow all of our neighboring states in assigning an empirical value to solar that I believe will help the industry meet more of New Hampshire's energy needs. Thank you so much.
Okay, is there anyone else who wishes to testify on part 7? I have no one. Is there anyone else who wishes to testify on Senate Bill 91? Please raise your hand. Okay, we have Cynthia Walter. Okay.
Hi, I've just.
Hold on. Okay, Miss Walter. Miss Walter, can you?
I pressed the unmute button.
You're good.
Yes, great. Can you all hear me?
We can.
All right, great. Thank you. So thank you so much. I've sent you all a written testimony, but I'd like to add to that, having heard your detailed discussions. I'm a scientist myself, and but I'm very, very impressed with the years going back to the 90s that you folks have been working on this, and I much appreciate that. However, I realize that I've also heard the word investment a lot. I've heard the word behind our neighbors a lot. I've heard the word some words like compromise a lot. And all of these are good things, which makes me think we need to move forward rather than delay passage of this bill. I appreciate that you're hesitant to go forward with the 5 megawatt without the PUC study, but I encourage you to reevaluate that and see if we can at least go ahead with 1 through 6 and then quickly move to the 5 megawatt part from part 7. And here's the reason why. It's that child that I mentioned in my letter. Those children are now wheezing. They're unable to breathe because of our use of fossil fuels. Out of their homes, it comes out of the spigots, from their boilers and so forth. This is an imminent problem. It's right here, right now. These details need to be worked out, and the money has to be exchanged, but the ratepayers are also the people who are breathing. They're also the breathers. And we have to consider the cost, the serious cost of delays in passing and moving forward with renewable energy and cleaner energy to New Hampshire. Also, the underemployed people need that income now. We need these jobs now. So I very much appreciate the difficulties of working out the details. But remember, we have to get this going faster than we have been. Somehow our neighbors have solved more of these problems than the state of New Hampshire. We have to go faster. Thank you very much for listening. Bye-bye.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak on Senate Bill 91?
Mr. Chairman? Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Senator Waters.
If there's nobody else to speak, and if I don't want to put Donna Gamache on the spot, but I did mention to her that it might be helpful for, if she were willing to speak for just a moment. I have a couple of questions, if that's agreeable. Otherwise,
that's fine.
Okay, Donna. Hold on. Let me, please okay, you're all set.
Hello, I'm here. This is Donna Gamache.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Donna. I sorry to put you on the spot, but I just wanted, because this is the public hearing on the bill, and I just, given the Zoom especially, I think it's important to have an opportunity. And so I don't expect to have any definitive answers here at all today, but let's set aside Section 7. Okay, let's just set aside
I think I'm
that.
frozen.
On the other sections of the bill, what are the, we've heard about the House bills and some concerns and some potential amendments and so on. So if you're able to say just which sections of the bill that you think you're going to be wanting to chat with me and others about, and if you want to go into details about that, fine, but just so we'd have on the public record the kinds of areas that you think that we ought to talk a little more about.
Donna, we can't hear you. She is gone. Oh, wait. Let me try again. Donna? I've got her on here, but I had heard her say thought she was frozen. Not having any luck bringing her in.
All right, well, that's
sorry, Senator.
Yeah, that's fine. I just want the public to know that there will be conversations going on, and I like as much to be out and transparent as possible, but here's where we are.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, that concludes our list of testifiers.
Yeah, can you hear me now? Okay,
Yes.
so from this point, is there any more discussion with the committee on this particular bill?
Senator Avard, I just saw that Donna Gamache is back and has her hand raised. So Deb, if you wanted to try to bring her in.
I think it's a little late for that now.
Oh, fair. No, understand.
I'm kidding. Go ahead. I'm kidding.
Wow.
Oh, I was just kidding.
Donna? Okay, Donna?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
I'm so sorry.
All right.
All day I'm in and out. I have no idea what's going on with my internet. So I did not hear any of the questions. I'm very sorry.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll just repeat it. And thanks again, Donna. And I get just because it's a public hearing, and I know there's going to be some ongoing conversation. I just wanted to, just to have the public have a chance to hear. Let's set aside Section 7 or Part 7 for now. But on the other sections, just if you have any details, fine. But if not, if you just could indicate what are the other sections of the bill that you'd like to have some more conversation on.
So I will say, generally speaking, it's not that we have great problems with anything that's in this bill. It's just that we need some clarity. And I would say the first section, not so much. Maybe just let me just say, let me get we just have some clarity questions. In some cases, and I can say that there's probably sections 1 through 6 that we have some questions, and they're probably all easily solved. In some cases, it's in drafting that some, like one section conflicts with another section someplace else in the bill. It's just little stuff like that. Also, there are some definitions. We don't know exactly what they mean. And I'm trying to find them. If I could just show you my paperwork, there's so many scribbles on it. That's why it's hard for me to find it exactly. But there's just some like I'm trying to find it where customers would, there's like no definition for when there's a section in there where customers would not be harmed, or it's something like that. And there's no definition. So I think that if I were to sit down with you and walk through all of them, I think we could probably solve most of them. I will say in terms of the aggregation issues that have been raised, we agree where there's an aggregation proceeding going on at the PUC, and there are some fixes that need to be made. And we've learned a lot along the process, and we've talked with a lot of aggregators. So much of what you heard today on aggregation, I just want to double check the amendments that you've received, that I just received today, to make sure they're crafted in a way that we're supportive of. But generally speaking, we recognize that there are some fixes needed for aggregation. So I don't know if that's helpful to you, Senator Waters, but I can summarize in an email to you if you'd like.
Well, thank you so much, Donna. And I guess my comment would be this, that and perhaps Senator Avar, we can have a brief executive session after this, but it seems to me, because of the 6 parts of the bill that we're looking at, that it might make sense that Donna and her colleagues at Eversource talk with me and with you, Mr. Chairman, to go over these things, and maybe Griffin could be there too. So that I'm just trying to think of process, how we're gonna, bring in these rather than going, and then of course we inform the sponsors of the underlying sections. But we can talk about that executive session, but that might be a way to make this work. So thank you so much, Donna.
Thank you.
Okay. So I hadn't planned on going into executive session today because I don't think we have all the amendments that we need at this point, but unless you have them all ready for this bill.
I guess, I wondered if we could just have a couple minutes of conversation about how we're going to do that process. So that might be helpful.
Sure.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, I have a Rick Menard whose hand just appeared. Do you care to take testimony?
Yeah, we're still in session. Yeah, we can do that.
All right, Mr. Menard?
Yes, how you doing? Good morning, all of you.
Good morning.
I'm not going to claim to be a legislator. I'm a citizen. I live in Manchester, New Hampshire. We recently had a solar array going into the dump on the east side. They reduced the size of that dump down to 1 meg because of the net metering bill. I also attended a water department meeting where the water department was getting paid to run the diesel generator that they never use during peak periods to reduce demand or capacity payments. And normally they only run that diesel generator for the purposes of maintenance. It is so cost ineffective to run it that it's only there for emergency purposes. The argument in regards to the 1 meg and 5 meg just seems like silly nonsense to me, because in one way they're paying obnoxious money to run a diesel generator to take the water department's station offline and making them capacity payments. And yet something that would be beneficial to all the citizens of this state, myself in Manchester, is opposed. I just see it as I'm an upset public citizen that feels that I'm just getting bent over. And I didn't spend a lot of time on the bill. I'm not addressing it directly. It's just a general statement. I've been an electrician for 50 years, so I got a little concept of that. And I thank you all very much for your time and for your representing us. It's a volunteer legislator, and I thank you all.
Appreciate your testimony. Thank you. Deborah, any more?
There are no.
Okay, so do I have a motion to move into a quick exec?
Actually, Senator, with no other testimony, just you might want to just officially say we're going to close the hearing on Senate Bill 91 and then move into executive session.
So moved. So we are going to close the hearing on this, and do I have a motion to move into exec?
I'll move.
I'll second.
Senator Waters moves to exec. Is there a second? And Senator Gray.
Great.
All in favor? I guess we have to do the roll call. So Senator Gaida. Senator Gaida.
Yes, unmuting. Senator Gaida votes yes.
Senator Waters.
Yes.
Senator Gray.
Yes.
Senator Quokka.
Yes.
Senator Avard, yes. All right. Welcome to exec. I got to tell you, I'm still trying to get used to all of this.
Yeah, really.
I like to be able to have a quick, hey, what's next? And it's just, this seems so foreign to me. So please, forgive me if I screwed up on anything. But yeah, as far as moving forward, if we can send all the amendments or proposed amendments, obviously, to Griffin, so that he can, deal with that. As far as having conversations, how we proceed, do we keep part 7 in? Do we keep part 7 out? And all that kind of stuff. It's up to you.
Yeah, I'd suggest, Mr. Chairman, that, part of the reason I want to talk is I think it's pretty clear 7's going to go.
Yeah.
And then the real question has, do we as committee members seeing any big red flags on parts 1 to 6? We're going to get some amendments on, but I just wanted to get the pulse of the committee about 1 to 6, whether we see any red flags or landmines in what we heard today.
I personally didn't see any, but Senator Gaida?
Yes, sir. At some point here, before we vote on anything, I'd like to go into caucus.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Oh, I don't want to vote on anything today.
No. This we can't. We still have to have the amendments, and we still kind of go through everything still. So,
thank you.
I didn't see anything red flags that jumped out at me, but I definitely want to see how all the amendments come together and still have a discussion. So, with all that, Senator Gray.
The thing that I want to comment on is not only this omnibus bill, but all of them. When I take a portion of an omnibus bill out, the question comes as to whether or not that is an adverse action by the Senate so that it would be precluded from being introduced next year. And there may be a way around that. I think people that are smarter than I about procedure should look at that. And that should, on section 7, if this committee does decide to separate it from the other parts, what happens to it, and what actions can we take to either preclude it from coming back next year or ensure that it may come back next year. So that is not necessarily a discussion for this committee, but for those people, both the majority and minority leaders of the Senate. So
If it was my understanding that we'd be able to divide the question either on the floor or somehow and separate it and vote it down or out or something to that. This is my first with doing these omnibus bills. So.
Yeah, it's a good question.
If you divide the question and you vote a particular section ITL, does that in fact say you cannot bring it back next year? That's my point.
Oh, I see. Thank you.
Yeah.
Senator Waters?
Yeah, I just say, I think Senator Gray raises a great point, because we're going to be wrestling with this all along. And, what happens if we send over, let's say we send over some of these omnibus bills and the whole thing gets killed in the House.
That was my biggest concern.
And then do we decide that these are going to be amended onto House bills that we get, or does that action from the House mean it can't come back next year? And, I think it's something that Senator Morse, he has the authority really to decide what can come back and what the rules are on that. And I trust him on that. But, it seems to me the cleanest is to have a committee amendment that takes out a section so that we're not having a vote on the floor up or down on the amendment, on that section, so that in terms of preserving its possibilities. But I really think it's for the attorney, the Senate attorney and Senator Morse to figure out, and, that guidance. But it's a good question. And
Just to have an ace up our sleeve, Griffin, if you can come up with that, or can we have that as a committee amendment to strike section 7 if necessary?
So yeah, so just so everyone's aware, Josh Elliott sent out a document last week kind of clarifying the process for committees in handling omnibus amendments. When it comes to in committee, dealing with omnibus bills is just an up and down vote on just the entire bill. We're not dividing the question in committee. We're just going with one amendment. So from the broad context that we're talking about, I think we're talking about maybe removing part 7. I'm sure there might be other amendments, but just for purposes now, you would just introduce an amendment that said, we're removing part 7 from Senate Bill 91. That's the amendment. You guys vote on it. And that would, potentially go to the Senate floor to be voted on. But I anticipate there might be other amendments that you guys might be considering.
Right. So have that in consideration and ready.
We'll see.
Yeah.
And so, Mr. Chairman, would you like me to just talk with Eversource myself, or should the two of us talk, or I could talk to them? As I had an email from Donna last night, and she said, I haven't been able to get to this because I've been working on the House thing, but we've got some tweaks in the language. And then we've heard today that, Cliff Bevo sent us some stuff and this and that and the other thing. So, I'd be glad to talk with her and then talk with you or
yeah, I think that's fine. And
whatever you want, just what's going to work. And,
well, it's your bill. Take the lead.
well, I just, the thing is, I just think it's so important that we have a consensus, because these omnibus bills, there's a lot of different senators who are invested in them. And I'd like to get to a product where we can go to the floor and say, we got something we all think can go forward. And, maybe we can on some of these, but, isn't that I think that's the omnibus situation kind of puts us into really trying to, cut what's got to be cut and improve what can be improved, and help all the underlying sponsors out.
I agree. Senator Cuoco, did you have anything?
No, I was just going to add, I think I have a couple language changes, so I'll work with Senator Waters on those, to help put them into the amendment.
Okay, so you're not going to take this personally if we amend your bill out, right? Or section 7 out. It's
not mine, so I won't be offended.
So, Senator Guider, anything? Senator Gray?
No, I'm good.
All right. And Senator Waters. Oh,
sorry.
Senator Griffin.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to clarify that Josh has been listening to our discussion about Senator Gray's point about bills back next year. He has obviously heard the discussion. He plans on talking with the Senate clerk and Senator Morse to get more guidance on procedure. The other thing I wanted to ask quite quickly, I wanted to see third floor is still trying to finalize a schedule moving forward for the different committees. And they wanted to see how the committee might feel about moving our meeting dates to Monday afternoons starting February 15th. I wanted to see if anybody had any, strong feelings one way or another about that scheduling move. And yeah.
This is Senator Gray. Moving it to February the 15th is moving it to President's Day. The next Monday is the Monday during the Senate break. So if you do that, starting the 15th, you've just lost 2 meeting dates. If you don't have enough bills, that's a problem, that's fine. But I'm running into the same thing in election law, where I need to make sure that I, by losing that Monday meeting, both on the 15th and the next week, can still adequately take care of my bills. So that is a consideration. And for that reason, again, depending upon what the chair sees on the horizon, I would support or not support based on our ability to get all the bills heard and exec.
Yeah, at this point, I don't want to lose a couple of days for hearings. Yikes. That's a good point. I'm not prepared to make a decision on it right now.
Nope, I just wanted to at least get a sense of the committee. If for some reason we did move to Monday afternoons, I wanted to see if anybody had any strong feelings opposed to it or anything like that. I don't get the sense that there is, but that there might be some scheduling concerns, obviously with President's Day and other days after that. So I'll certainly talk with Josh. I'm sure he's listening to all of this. Discussions will continue.
Okay.
Again,
Senator Gray?
If that starts on March the 1st, then that's a different story about moving it to Monday, because you're not going to lose any more days. So
Yeah. Senator Quokka? Did you?
No, I was just going to say thanks for asking. That does work for me.
All right, we'll get back to you on this. But so far, is there a conflict with you, Senator Gaida? Senator Gaida?
I got a number of committee meetings that are, statutory committee meetings on Mondays, a fair amount of them, usually 3 anyway, 2 at least, usually 3. So it could be conflict. Plus in the morning, I've got Ways and Means.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, I've got commissions too, but I mean, the committee's got to have priority. And
I agree with that, Dave, but I also
I just don't know what to
you
say.
start losing 2 days, you're going to hurt the committee.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I've got 1 at 3 that I might be double zooming sometime, but
Well, is it necessary to move this? Because I share Senator Gray's opinion that, if we're going to drop 2 days, if we don't have anything else to do, well, maybe that's okay. But
yeah, no, and I can continue conversations with the committee offline. I don't necessarily think we need a quorum or anything to discuss it. But in any case, I just wanted to at least have the discussion so that Josh could hear it. The third floor will take that under advisement and everything like that.
All right, Senator Gray?
technically you only lose 1 day, and that's President's Day. The second week, you wouldn't have a meeting whether or not you were on a Monday or a Tuesday. But again, it depends more on you, Mr. Chair, as to whether we can get our work accomplished with or without a meeting on the week of the 15th.
We'll wrap this up as soon as we can, but I don't think we're prepared to make that decision just yet. Senator Waters, you're going to talk with Donna Gamarsh, and all the amendments will be going to Griffin, and we'll come up with a decision as far as moving from Monday to Tuesday or not. And other than that, anything else? Seeing none, is there a motion to move out of exec?
So moved.
Senator
Gaida.
Okay, I was going to say something else. Senator Gaida, I'm sorry. Moves to adjourn. Senator Gray seconds it. Senator Quokka?
Yes.
Senator Waters?
Yep.
Senator Gaida?
Yes.
And Senator Gray?
Yes.
And Senator Avard, yes. Thank you all very much. And
no.
Move to adjourn.
Senator.
Move.
Senator.
Yeah.
Yes.
That was my next move. All right. Move to adjourn.
Moved.
Moved by Senator Gaida. Seconded by Senator Gray. Starting with you, Senator Gray.
Yes.
Senator Gaida.
Yes.
Senator Quokka.
Yes.
Senator Waters.
Yes.
Senator Griffin. Oh, I'm sorry. I am teasing. Senator Avard. We really appreciate you both, Griffin and Deborah. We really appreciate all
Yeah, thank you. Good job.
Just having a little fun, but thank you all.
Hey, get some sleep, Senator.
Yeah, it's been a long 24 hours, but actually 48.
Yeah.
And I think I can feel my head is just kind of spinning right now. So plus I had to do all the plowing, and I got to go do my father-in-law's in Drake it now. So God bless you all. Take care.